Ethos prototypes using prototype theory to examine visual communication across cultural exchanges. So this may address some of the questions and things.
Hopefully so. Real quick, the fastest visual way to figure out you're dealing with an English teacher is to look at the title of what they've written, because it will always take up more than 2 lines of horizontal space. We are genetically pre-programmed for that. If you drop the font size, I'll increase the text. It's just something we do. This is how you know us. My name is Kirk St.Amant. I teach in the Department of English at Texas Tech University, and I teach in an area called technical communication. Essentially, I teach students how to work with engineers or computer programmers to take technical data, technical information, and convert it into things like user manuals, into web support systems, into software help systems, and also into user interface designs for different technical products. For the purposes of this presentation, I refer to all that stuff together as documentation, which is kind of how we speak about it. And just for the record, I'm not responsible for the really bad documentation that came with any of your computer products. That's somebody else's students. The complaints department is down the hall. We actually teach people how to write complaint responses, which is an interesting facet of my job. Within my job, one of the funky things is we have to talk about multimodality with instruction sets in terms of text and images. Because how many of y'all have had a set of instructions and you're going through it cursing, saying, if I had a picture of what this thing should look like, I could actually get it done? So that's kind of the new holy grail in my discipline, is figuring out how do we take images and integrate them with text to make workable systems. My particular area of research is in intercultural communication. That is, I look at things like how to teach students how to write more effectively so translators can translate their documentation more easily, or how machines can process and translate documentation from English to something else more easily. I also play a bit with, we talked about internationalization earlier, teaching students how to design interfaces that are easily internationalizable. That is, to take them designed for one culture and make it more universal. Within that framework, sort of the holy grail of my discipline is something called simultaneous international release. That is, how can we have a product ready to go so it releases in all markets internationally at the same time? Why this is important for me and my colleagues is, I mean, if Nokia wants to release a product anywhere, it's not a hard deal because essentially the product is a product. But the documentation that has to go with it, everything from the user manual to the support system that's online, has got to be translated and ready to go at that time. So we're always looking for a way to cut down translation and localization time. And what people are looking at is images. How can we cut text and cut translation by inserting or using more and more images? The problem is, as you all have been speaking about today, while images do say 1,000 words, what they say can vary from one culture to another with the same image. And with that said, I'd like to take a little test. Could you all take out a piece of paper and a pen? What are the 8 parts of speech? No, I'm kidding. Real quick, we've all probably played this game before. I'll say a word, and I want you to write down the first thing that comes to mind. But can you all hear me in the back? I'm the classic English professor. I mumble and talk to my shoes all the time. Okay, cool. First word. Clothing. First thing that comes to mind. Clothing. Second word. Tool. Third word, VaIL. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I've got a Western Virginia accent that can cut like a knife. Could you advance slide, please? If not, I can keep going. Sweet. So this is what you got. For the first one, let's see how good of a mind reader I am. For clothing, how many people have shirt? How many people have pants? Nobody here wears, one person wears pants. Just for my sake of sanity, did anybody write down vest? Socks? Sarong? Dashiki? No. Cool. What do people have? Hat, store, shirt. Okay. Sort of like a shirt. So where you buy things, kind of? Spanish. I'm sorry. So same kind of thing. Cool. Second one, tool, hammer. Screwdriver. Saw. Anybody have reciprocating saw? Anybody have toothbrush? Which is technically a tool. Pencil. All right. What else? What did everybody else have? Wrench. 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 Okay. So we're back to that Home Depot inference that was made earlier. Sweet. Vehicle. Car. Truck. Anybody have unicycle? Skateboard. All right? Why the clustering? And this is from my field what's important. The idea is something that's called a prototype. The notion being that for the words that are out there, we tend to have visual images that come to mind that pop up that are associated with them. So when I say a word, you tend to think a particular thing. The reason that you got this, what's called the clustering effect in my discipline, the reason this clustering effect around words shows up is we are acculturated to associate specific visual images with certain words over time. So the reason it might be shirt in this culture is because when we see clothing or hear the word clothing, it's in association with seeing a shirt. It's acculturation. Same thing with tool. Most of us, the hammer is the one tool we see the most often. That becomes the visual representation we associate with it, so on and so on. Now, where that gets wild with, these are called prototypes. They're visual representations of the words we use. Where this becomes interesting is if you and I have different associations with the same word, different visual associations, we can talk past each other while speaking the same language. My favorite example, and we've probably all been through this, is my wife, who I love very much, will call me at home and say, "I've forgotten my purse, can you bring it to me?" And I will look all over our house, I will tear it apart, and I cannot find her purse, because I'm looking for a leather object about yay big with a handle on it. I can't find it, I can't find it, I can't find it. I'm sorry, dear, I can't find it. She comes home and it's sitting there on the coffee table and she says, "I was looking for my purse." She's different. But the idea is what I visualize in association with that word and what she visualizes allows me not to see what she's talking about. And from an intercultural perspective, where that gets important is if we're enculturated into what we see visually when we hear a word, then we can use the same words to talk about different things within a field. Does that make sense so far? Sir?
It sounds like you're talking about two different things at the same time here. In one case, you're talking about prototypes of one word for another word or another concept. So clothing invoking shirt doesn't necessarily have to be a visual thing that is invoking shirt. You don't have to think clothing. You're thinking of the concept of shirt, not the visual image. But for something like purse, you're thinking about different specific spatial representations of that. So it seems like you're talking about two different aspects of...
Sure. Basically, we're not, from a technical communication perspective, we're not as advanced as a lot of the cognitive theories that are out there. But the one thing that we do try to focus on is that words generally have visual representations associated with them that whenever we write, we have to anticipate what does the audience see visually or think of visually whenever I use this word to convey an idea to somebody. So it's very basic. But again, we're a very new field, and we're trying to sort of, this is one of the reasons I want to talk with you all today. What things should we be looking at to improve, if that makes sense? Could I have the next slide, please? Sure, that's fine. In research that we're very basic with visual design, but one of the things that we tend to focus on in the research we have out there in visual design is separating how images are seen by audiences in two different ways. One is kind of the logical. That is, if I say something or if I show you a picture of something, do you recognize what it is? I show you a shirt, you see it, yes, that's a shirt. The other part that people are starting to look at in my field is the emotional response to the visual that you've got there. Yeah, I see it's a shirt, but it's the ugliest looking shirt I've ever seen and I never wear it. So the question becomes, when we start studying in my field how we design instruction sets to help people both in our own culture and other cultures, how do we look at both parts of this picture to get a full representation or full understanding? And so that's kind of what we study a little bit. Could I have the next slide, please? And so for us, the general notion is that most of the stuff dealing with the logical side, being able to identify it, is being done by other fields that are out there. Can I see this? Can I identify it? Yes. What most of the folks in my field try to figure out is that emotional side. Can we get a grasp on it to figure out what makes something a good, an acceptable, a persuasive example of something, particularly in terms of using a visual image to convey information to other audiences? If you could, please. And if I could ask an odd question, can you tell me what this is? Wonder Woman, okay. Wonder Woman, we see woman. Can you give me some characteristics or traits about this woman? Okay, confident, Linda Carter. Strong, powerful, individualistic, independent, invisible plane, heroine, specific clothing.
Additional accessories.
Cool, so clothing and accessories. The reason I bring it up is back in terms of technical information across cultures, this is where people can begin to look at things. In the late 90s, DC Comics and the United Nations decided to team up and produce a series of comic books that would be used to teach children in Eastern Europe and in Central America about the dangers of landmines. The idea was superheroes that were seen as universally recognizable, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, would be used as the heroes who would teach young girls and young boys how to detect landmines and how to avoid them, worst case scenarios, how to defuse them if need be. Now, with that in mind, Wonder Woman was called out as the ideal female character to show young girls how to go about detecting and avoiding landmines. Whenever the standard American conception of Wonder Woman was used in this comic series and user tested with Latin American audiences, the first thing that came out was, no, this will not fly, you may not use this. Because Wonder Woman is dressed in a way that's unacceptable for members of our culture. Could I have the next slide, please? Rather, her outfit had to be redesigned to make it more conservative in a way that would be seen as acceptable to parents in that culture or to authority figures in that culture. And note the differences in the design of the outfit. Again, the notion is still to convey the emotional effect of strong, powerful woman who people can associate with heroine, but there's a different style, emotional response to this is acceptable, this is not. And so this is what, in my field at least, prompts people to look at what are some of the factors cross-culturally that we need to look at with images to figure out what makes them acceptable to different cultural groups. I hope that makes sense. Could I have the next slide, please? Within this, people have, since I come out of English and communication studies, speech communication, the theory that we tend to use to play with it a bit is known as rhetoric. Or if you're into Aristotelian classicisms, the art of persuasion. And within Aristotle's philosophy of persuasion, or what makes people accept, believe, or use things, marketing if you would, is this notion of ethos. Ethos is acceptability or credibility. And ethos isn't random according to Aristotelian concepts. Rather, the idea is all audiences have a preconceived notion in their mind of what they are looking for when they come to a product or to a document or to a visual. And if you meet what they expect, certain specific things, certain specific characteristics or ethos conditions, then that audience will consider the image, or in Aristotle's case, the oral presentation, credible, acceptable, believable. Good marketing, if you would. Could you advance slide, please? With that in mind, one of the things that people in my field have played with web design is looking at, well, okay, back to this emotional response thing. If we look at the logical side, the identifiable, and the emotional side, how can we use ethos to tease out what those conditions are, those factors that people look for? And what I'd like to do is show you a series of websites, splash pages for a corporate website, and I'd like you to try to answer 3 questions. What's the company selling? Who is the intended audience? If you can, their demographic. Are they male, female, young, old, middle income, higher income? And then what's your emotional response to what you see? First slide, please. Again, what's the company selling? Who's their target demographic audience? And what is your initial emotional response to what you see? Second slide, please. Oh, sorry, next slide, please. Same question. What are they selling? Who's the market? What's your initial emotional response? Next slide. Product, target audience, emotional response. Final slide, please. Or next slide, please. I'm sorry. Same questions. The first slide you saw, the snowman slide, what are they selling? Hats, snow, okay.
No idea.
Okay. Second slide, what are they selling? The one where you've got the guy in the white suit that's kind of at the Moroccan bazaar. Okay. Third slide, the James Bond slide with the little thing behind the back. Okay. And final slide? Okay. These are all of these come from the same place. This is all Sony. These are Sony's splash pages for China was the first one, France was the second one, Egypt was the third one, and this one is Brazil. And in each case, if you go, I just pulled the image off the splash page. If you go to these splash pages and look at the products that are being sold, they're almost identical. So you're selling similar products to ideally the same customer base, but you're using very different images to create that sense of credibility to draw that customer base in and work. And so,
Does it work?
it seems to. I mean, I've not seen Sony release any information that says how successful it is. All I can comment on is what their market share is in different nations.
So what is that thing?
I believe it's a video camera.
A what?
A video camera, a camcorder of some sort. But what people in my discipline are trying to figure out is, okay, if this thing is successful or not, what are the conditions, what are the pieces and parts in it that people look at that say, yeah, this is a valid image, I believe in this product, I think it's worthwhile, I'll buy it. Can I have the next slide, please? And so you've all given me the breakdown to this. Was it the same emotional response across the board? No, very different. Was it this, did you anticipate the same market or even the same product? So again, that whole notion of difference. Next slide, please. So at least one of the things that we're trying to do in TechCom is try to figure out something called an ethos prototype. That is, when people look at a visual image in culture X, what do they think are the ideal characteristics something in that culture needs to have to A, be identified as this kind of object? This is a car, number one. But number two, more importantly, it's a valid, acceptable, good kind of object. It's something they would buy or they would use. So part two. These are the two kinds of things we're looking at. And the research questions that drive us are, what are the characteristics in a given culture that define ethos? How are they essential to creating credibility? And the holy grail is something called minimum ethos threshold conditions. And that is to get you to recognize and accept something. What's the minimum number of visual features it's got to have? Because if I can hit that, I can design an image that's very quick to replicate, but also very easy to localize and internationalize. Can I have the next slide, please? Fine. Can you tell me what, write down real quick, bird. What makes a good bird? Wings. Anything else? Any other characteristics?
Small legs.
Small legs, cool.
Flight.
Flight. Doesn't poop everywhere. Cool. Next slide, please. So real essentially then, which one of these is a better example of a bird if I'm going to, say, own a bird shop? The blue jay. So again, this is, in terms of ethos characteristics, you mentioned small. The flightless probably kills the emu off, but they both get feathers, they both lay eggs. Can I have the next slide, please? Is one of these a better bird than the other? Or I mean, would both, if I was going to advertise bird food, would they work interchangeably well to advertise my product? And so the question becomes, both of these must have the minimum ethos threshold conditions needed to determine that, yep, this is good, it's acceptable, it's recognizable. And so it's a matter of untangling what are those conditions so we can use them. Could I have the next slide, please? My favorite. You're seeing a lot of this being done in the usability design area of my field. And they look heavily at websites. And so one of the things that's gotten a lot of attention recently is luxury cars. What are the overall visual design features you've got to have in a legitimate website designed to sell luxury cars to culture X, to make the product seem not only accessible, but worthwhile, worth buying? Next slide, please. So I don't know if y'all can see this from here. This is luxury cars for China, the Chinese market. We have we have Cadillac, Mercedes, and Jaguar as the three luxury cars being sold to a Chinese audience. And the question then becomes, are there any standard visual design patterns that you see across all three? They all have the car, all the cars at a certain angle. Anything else? Let's contrast it. Could I have the next slide, please? The American sites for the same companies for luxury car. Are there any similarities across these three sites? Okay, so options, choices, where the other one had just maybe one car to look at. Anything else? Size, okay. Cool. So we've got 2 SUVs, 3 actually, if you look at the third one, the bottom examples. So this is kind of the growing area of research in my discipline, is figuring out what are these characteristics, what are these features, and can we use them to replicate? Could I have the next slide, please? And it can occur within sites as well. These are examples of Jaguar from China. There's the splash page. There's the interior site. One of my colleagues who's working on this has noted that not only do you see sort of similarity in, they've got multiple pictures that drop down, but the angles are always the same. If you go into the site, for some odd reason, the car is always shown from the same angle. Is that a design characteristic, an ethos condition, needed to create a credible website design for this culture? Could I have one more, please? And finally, one thing that some people are trying to play with is, can you use, if you've got ethos conditions that create credible images, can you then use them to create credible abstractions? If you know that this minimum number of characteristics creates a recognizable object, and this other number creates a recognizable and an acceptable object, then can we use those factors to create recognizable, acceptable abstracts? And so things like faces and vases are optical illusions. If you look at the faces there, you can recognize them. But also, in some cases, they're fairly internationally standard if you think about it in terms of there's no race portrayed, there's no age portrayed, there's really no gender portrayed. So it's recognizable, it could be seen as acceptable. It's a possibility in terms of figuring out how to take this notion of ethos prototypes and build it into abstract representations. Could I have one more, please? And so, back to these two things. What are the differences in terms of creating ethos prototypes for strong women in two different cultures? Questions? And again, thank you all for your time. This is more, again, my field is very new in exploring this kind of thing. And I'm very interested in input and feedback that can help myself and my colleagues further our research in this area. The text part we're doing fairly well with. The image part we're new to. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Sir, then. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
What sort of annotation schematic do you use? Like when you decide what qualities images have, how do you rate them, how do you categorize them?
Right now it's brute force. And I get one of my colleagues who does this with websites simply goes through and what are all the visual features I see on this website? And basically creates a schematic that way. Then says, okay, I see it on this site, I'm going to compare it to another website. How many of them are parallel? They overlap. How many are not? And then it's a matter of just continual comparison. Essentially, we're in struggle looking for a schema that can help us try to categorize this.
So it would seem like we would have our American perspective on this process.
Yep. And so and that's the tough part, is figuring out, is there a non-biased way to look at these things and try to come up with a solution? Maybe, maybe not. But we're trying. Cool. I'm sorry, someone down here. Yes? Huh?
Have you looked at the research and development that was done by LEGO?
No.
LEGO, when you say the Holy Grail is released worldwide with minimal worry about translation, LEGO has no words. And they spent a lot of time in R&D for their little booklets for how to put together the Legos, because they simultaneously release in 20 countries, 20 different languages at the same time. They have one printing.
That's awesome.
So
that's a great idea.
I do not know how much they have published about the research that they have done, but they may be an interesting resource for the iconographic side of that.
That's a great idea. Thank you. That's exactly what I mean. Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
A general idea of the direction we're heading. The tool we don't intend to be, a finished or completed or refined product, and so you're going to be like, oh, it has limited usefulness, but this is a prototype, and this is pointing us in the right direction, I think. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and he's going to give you a demonstration of the tool as well.
Well, good morning. So I get to be the first demo. All right. So like Sunny was saying, this is a very simple chat tool. We're just starting out. We're playing with a concept, which is augmenting text chat, the same kind of chat you'd be using in either instant messaging or IRC type chat. And we're trying to use tools like adding images, icons, other metadata in order to spruce it up in a certain way and to relay information better, contextual information, the speed of transfer of knowledge. That's what we're kind of going for. But as you'll see, this is a very simple first attempt. And what we're looking for here is especially feedback on how does the user input look, where do you see this going, what kind of icons would you think would be useful, where should we go with this. At this point, I have some very, very simple icons. And so because we're just starting to gather data from, basically we're creating what we call a visual language dictionary. And this is a very small repository of images and some keywords that relate to these images. and to be used to augment text. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So I'm going to show you lots of very simple examples and where we've gone so far, but we're looking for feedback at any time. And Sunny's going to be taking notes when we get back. So it's very open, so anytime, just have any questions or comments, just let me know. So we'll start out with the first piece. How we did the first design is this very bottom part, this highlighted green. This is the green indicates where the input's currently at. And so just like any other simple chat client, there's an input box on the very bottom, and usually there's always some type of little button that you can either click to send the message or you can hit enter. But what it does after you hit enter here is it takes it from the first input pane and puts it into this intermediate section. This intermediate section is where the computer gets to analyze the text and try to find anything it knows about, it understands, and tries to see if it can go ahead and find some type of image replacement or some type of augmentation that you could add in. I'll give you examples. The first one it was just a colon with a in parentheses and that's basically I have this example because that's kind of what we're thinking about leet speak, right? And almost every IM in the world now will automatically replace that with a smiley face, right? So that's a general idea. It's not very useful because people get that's a smiley. Replacing it with emoticons is somewhat useful, but not really useful. But just a very simple example of how it happens. So what he did is it was just a colon and an end brace, and then he right-clicked and he chose that he wanted to turn it into a happy smiley. And so we hit enter again, and it sends it out to whoever else you're communicating with. So now the chat's been augmented in some way or enhanced in a very small way. Hit the next example, something a little bit more useful. Yeah, go ahead. And sometimes with emoticons, sometimes there's some really strange ones. And an example of another way of doing a smiley face is kind of, I guess there's a Japanese version which is horizontal that they'll use instead. And this is another example. You see, he put it in there, and you can change it into the exact same happy smiley because it means the same thing. Just go ahead and get the next examples. Okay. And besides being able to replace the emoticons with a picture, also what's useful, Sonny touched on before, is to get acronyms in. And for instance, this is AFMIC, and you might not everyone may know what that means exactly. So what you can do is you can actually attach a definition to it. Armed Forces Medical Intelligence Center, if you want. And when you do that and send it through, it's set. Enter. Now, when other people are looking at it, if you right-click on the AFMIC up there, and they can see what the definition is. Now, it'll automatically give them a definition of what that is. The next example is the WHO. And that could be World Health Organization, but what if there's other things it might mean instead of just World Health Organization? In here,
it could just be a question too.
Yeah, who? That's a good point. The linguist over there. But here, you right-click on it. It could be the World Hockey Organization or or it could be Wild Hogs Online, who knows. But here it'll allow you to go ahead and pick, what did you really mean when you said WHO, right? And you can send that off. Then you can actually have no definition associated with it. It's always optional. The computer's just recognizing any text that's highlighted in blue, it recognizes as something that's inside of this dictionary. And so at that point, you can take the time to associate a definition for it, or you can think, no, I don't even want to do that. I just want to pass it out just as it is. I just meant who. Or it could be that whatever was defined in the dictionary, maybe we don't have that particular one yet. Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Can you type in your own expansion?
That's going to come up. And that's something we're really looking into. So at this point, we're looking into low bandwidth. And so what we're seeing here is there's a dictionary that pulls all the information out of. Well, the idea is that everyone would have exactly the same dictionary at every counterpoint, so that when they're trying to send information over a very low bandwidth wire, the definition will already be there for them. So if you need to add a new definition in there, then it's going to take slightly more bandwidth. And so we're looking into ways of trying to like send new definitions over. But that's something we're going to definitely think about implementing.
Well, your dictionary is only good for an hour or so.
Yes. Yeah.
So the importance of that obviously is in joint work where they have different acronyms. Same acronyms mean completely different things.
Yeah, that's good. And
worse for coalition where
right.
the acronyms are like age versus CDEF.
Yeah, it's going to be very important to keep the dictionary open. It's also going to be important to load dictionaries that are specific to what other task force they're using. For instance, it is good to have a global dictionary that maybe would have lots of definitions. But then again, if you're in a certain community that has certain acronyms that usually always mean the same thing, then those should take precedence over a global information repository. And so there's a lot of things we need to look into. We need to look into having multiple, what we're calling user libraries, which are libraries that are suited to whoever's using the chat. So it's kind of more individualized. We're also looking into the matter of adding new definitions on the fly. And we're also looking into taking some linguistic analysis and being able to figure out, let the computer figure out, what have you used? Has the chat been going on so long that it's starting to recognize terms that are enough to maybe make into new definitions? And so that's something we're also looking into. Not in this version yet, but we're trying to roll that in so that the computer can actually start making up the definitions as it rolls along to figure out what you're actually saying. But that's future work for us. We'll go to the next example, please. In this example here, we have a very simple sentence. And now I got to tell you that we don't have a lot of images loaded up here yet. So the examples you're seeing are very simplistic. It's just to demonstrate kind of the lines we're thinking through. But
in the back read that, by the way?
oh, let me read it to you.
Is it possible to increase the font?
Or focus it better.
No, probably. Well,
I just was wondering, because I haven't heard him say that thing up front.
okay.
Well, then we can redefine it, but it must just be your eyes.
Okay.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you probably need glasses.
It-
With
it-
my
it-
glasses, I can't, but without, I can't.
You know, there are seats in the front, but what it says, though, is the fuel truck has arrived at the chemical plant. And here, the computer has recognized that the words fuel and chemical are recognized by the dictionary. So at this point, we have the option to associate an icon to these. And now, you know, the argument is that, well, are these icons even going to be useful? I mean, I already know what fuel is. I don't need an icon to designate to me that this is fuel, in fact. Or chemical, you know, it's not so complicated that I might need an image. But what we're figuring is that actually, those might be useful in that they can draw attention to something that you're trying to say. So when I'm saying the fuel truck has arrived, I might want to emphasize that I'm talking about chemical, and this type of chemical, and has a special symbol. So for other users, when they're scanning through a bunch of text, they might see this image in there, and they might be able to go, wow, this is what we're looking for. Let's zoom in on this. So it can also draw pieces, just like maybe italicizing something would. Yes, please.
Well, if any of our coalition partners are in that chat room, that'd be really helpful for them.
Oh, yes. That's another good point.
And also, I think it would serve to disambiguate. The problem with text, and of course this would have to be also solved within the dictionary itself, but that you can have misspellings. Now, fuel and chemical may or may not be words that get misspelled often, but if you can associate an icon with it, then it'll probably disambiguate a little further for you.
Good point.
And also Sunny's argument yesterday about tank, meaning
Right.
a number of different things. You know,
Right.
we only have one icon associated with fuel right now, but something like tank, we want to disambiguate.
Very good. Please, you have a question?
I can see where this would be helpful in terms of, large scale command and control sorts of things, but you start getting into some of these chat rooms that move very fast, like air warfare. They don't have time to sit here and pick out icons and those sorts of things. Okay. So you may get pushback from certain communities saying, this is making my life harder.
Sure. And so what we're trying to do is that this is a very clumsy interface. This is my first attempt. This is our team's first attempt at an interface. And we realize this is extremely clumsy because it's 2 parts. And that's not good. So what we're thinking about doing is have the computer start to learn. So maybe you only have to teach it once, or maybe the admin teaches it once that when they're typing out chemical, maybe they mean this, and so it'll try to discern this is what they're trying to say, because we don't want to slow down the output. We don't, but we're trying to figure out how to get there, because we want to get to the point where we don't even notice it doing this, or it's just super fast to augment something, and that's what I'm trying to get to. You're next.
Have you seen how people type Japanese?
No.
Or Chinese?
No.
Well, when you use a Romanized keyboard, you essentially type the phonetics of it. And then, because Japanese uses 3 scripts, so it uses 2 phonetic scripts and Chinese characters. And so when you're typing phonetically, it's converting all of the Romanized things into the phonetic scripts. And then it keeps an underline. And you have to hit return in order to get that underline to kind of solidify it as what you want. But if you hit spacebar, it gives you a little menu of all the different things that you could possibly choose from of the Chinese characters or a different script if you're trying to convey something with a different script. So it would essentially get rid of your whole second box there to do something like that. That's because good. It just gives you a little menu, and then you go down, select which one you want, and then hit return, and then it solidifies what you want.
Is it somewhat like the word completion you'll find in Google when you're starting to type out almost all of the whatever word, and then it will give you a choice?
Similar, but just has a floating box.
Okay.
So the question I would have on that addresses your question, which is, and I'm sure they've gotten fast. I mean, the Japanese are very fast at typing. So is it fast enough that it would solve like these air warfare situations?
I'm not sure if that's how the Japanese type per se, but that's how I type in Japanese.
But so a Japanese keyboard, right, could have, but a Chinese keyboard does that,
right?
Because the character set, if I understand correctly, is larger than the keyboard set.
But yeah, you can write really fast in it. There's no problems with speed if you know what you're looking for, and if you also know what you're doing.
And so the
certainly faster than having 2 boxes.
The counter argument though is that those folks have learned to touch type in that language, and it's going to be hard to get people who chat up to speed really fast.
Right.
Right.
I was thinking with this is that kind of on the same lines where you start going, let's say you don't want anything replaced, we just type. That's it. Press enter and it's in. Right. You want something replaced, you start typing fuel, you start typing FU, control space. And so you've got a menu that comes up, right? And it starts with the FU.
That's good. So as soon as you start, you know you want to augment already. Right. I get it.
Yeah. That, and then you just have that, and perhaps in that mode, once you're already selecting whatever that is, it automatically says, oh, well, I know you want an icon for this.
Sure.
My thing.
That's a good example.
Text.
Okay.
Because as soon as I press control space, I know I want to go for the icon.
Okay.
Or, I don't know, just ideas.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Thank you. I'm sorry. In the back.
We've been working something called Coalition Chat for a few years, where you type in English out, and if your coalition partner is Polish, it translates it. But what's important is that whoever you're talking to is fluent and literate, and that's not always the case when now in the U.S. most folks in the armed forces are high school graduates.
Right.
It's not always the case with your coalition partners, so these kind of things I think are important for working with them.
That's interesting.
I'm just curious when you type it now it's sort of like 3 times each word, like the symbol, fuel, and then fuel in parentheses, something in parentheses, which I can't read, but
right.
chemical. Doesn't that make it like a little
to
this person that's
this is not that's a good point. Is it what it's doing here is adding back in a more explicit definition. So your non-explicit definition might be chemical, but the more explicit one might be a certain type of chemical. That's what we're, but that was a bad example. But that's what we're trying to get to, because it could be a chemical, but in parentheses, it actually could explain exactly what kind of chemical you really meant to say, to try to define it a little bit more. Then we'll go back to you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say about the menu, I think it's a nice idea that we take into consideration the limited screen resolution and space that's available to these people.
Right.
Talking about 17-inch displays.
Right. That's good. Yeah, you make sure it works in the 640 by 400.
Where does it go?
Right. Okay.
I think one of our long-term goals is to make it, it's written in Java, so it's cross-platform now, and we intend on it being able to run on small devices, but we haven't addressed any of the usability issues with doing display on small devices.
Question?
I'm kind of getting back to what she said. Are you guys considering doing anything on the receiving end to actually, say, make the text more compact? And in the event that something is ambiguous, they then have the option of expanding it to see that more complete definition?
Yes, actually, I'll show that coming up, that you can give a better, more explicit. Let's just go to the next page. Let's just skip down to that one. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And this is a longer example of something. Basically, the text coming out before this is it might, the scenario is there's, maybe there's some ground forces that went into a new area, and they're kind of worried because the locals aren't feeling so good, right? So they're trying to figure out if there's, some type of, disease that they have to be careful for, and, what should they be looking for? So here, if we were like CDC, maybe we'd be able to, write out, back to the soldiers that, hey, you might want to look out for whatever. And in this example, we're talking to them, we're saying, be aware of meningitis that might be in the area. So what Bob can do right now is he can right-click on the meningitis, and he can give an example. Sorry, first of all, about the images. This is Sunny's fault. Pick that one right there.
Sunny's wife is
right.
a doctor.
And then go ahead, enter, please. Right. And here, if you go up and you right-click on that picture now, is that you give, sorry again, a better indication of what they're talking about. So, just small icons we can transmit. We can transmit like very rich metadata, because we don't have to send this information over the wire. It's already going to exist in dictionaries that the user is going to have on their side. So you can, explicitly say, hey, it's going to look like this, and these are the symptoms, and actually give a synopsis of, more text. So what you're saying, there's going to be more information available, and they can blow it up anytime they want to see it. Please.
Another thing to be careful of is that you have, and not just Navy, you have extreme disadvantaged users out there who are not going to necessarily have the memory capacity for these sorts of things. Text-based chat is in theater right now on PDAs. You can't suck up an entire SD card just with the dictionary for the chat, because they need to have their maps, they need to have all these other things. So, great ideas, but be careful of how big you make this dictionary, and also if you have people who are in the remote parts of Afghanistan or Pakistan, how are they going to get the dictionary update?
Yes, that's what we were talking about earlier, is that when you're adding new definitions into the dictionary, at that point, then you have to deal with really low bandwidth, because how are you going to get these out there? How are you going to, because sending images is sometimes not even possible at all. And then you'd have to, right. So the idea, the most ideal situation would be try to send out as much information as possible. Even if that means maybe having some type of centralized server that they can plug their PDAs to download whatever information they need for an area. But we're still working along those lines, because that's the challenge that we're going to face.
Yeah, and I should note that we shouldn't don't treat this as something that should run on current platforms or current PDAs, because it isn't. We don't intend it to. Memory density is increasing very quickly, and there's a lot of devices out there that are pocket sized that have 68 gigs of memory.
But Sunny, satellite bandwidth is not increasing very quickly.
Exactly. Bandwidth is not increasing quickly, but the capacity on a small device is. So we feel that by leveraging the latent memory, whether it be flash memory or a small portable hard drive like an iPod has, that we'll be able to resolve a lot of these issues.
Well, but
10 years from now.
Yeah, because also when you're thinking about the devices that are available right now, those are not ruggedized. And it's extremely expensive to have them go through the mill standard, I think it's 811 or something like that, to have them go through that process. So, I mean, the ruggedized devices that I'm working with today do not have that kind of memory capability, even though we can go out and buy ones that are much better. They don't have it. We gotta go with what's been approved. But you're always going to have these extreme disadvantaged users. If this is a scalable option, right, so that we can choose to have smaller dictionaries that may be more relevant to infantry or to comms or something like that. If this is a scalable solution, great, but we have to bear in mind that this is not a one-size-fits-all bucket that we got here.
No, this has a very specific application. I think it could be useful, but at the same time, we realize that, I mean, even in 10 years from now, the warfighter, I can speak for the Navy, but we're about 10 years behind, so usually, we won't get the latest and greatest, and so obviously, that's always going to be a concern. We're going to allow ourselves a little more headroom here to explore the technologies, but we know that for a fact, when it comes to the warfighter, we're going to have to deal with many challenges to try to get this done.
And perhaps you might be a person that we can talk to, in the next year or two, so we can actually get some hard numbers for things that we need to specify for and get stuff down to for viewings. Absolutely.
So just as a counterpoint, I think, actually I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
I'm Christy Adams.
Christy. What Christy's point is excellent. My slight counterpoint fear to that is kind of ConOps creep. And by that I mean, we might start by saying just download the dictionary you need for your theater or your environment. But remember, these are guys these are warfighters who are coming from the civilian chat world and game playing world. And they may just start, they may send information from a theater where they have lots of pictures and lots of data to one where there's not. And then what does it look like on the other end? So if you do this scalable thing, you have to have that kind of translation, right? You have to be so that they at least get the text that the image was supposed to represent. And that's a non-trivial natural language processing problem that you need to address. I think her point is a great point.
Yeah, so maybe we can design it in such that there would be a large text-only dictionary, but maybe for the images, it would have to be just for certain communities, because that's what's going to take up most of the images, obviously.
In respect to being text only, we intend, right now we're kind of saying kind of image type ambiguous. We don't care. We don't say ambiguous. We don't care what type of image we're using. We're kind of converting things to PNG, but we should be doing all of our symbol graphics as SVG, which is a plain text format. It's very compressible, very, very small, which means we can have hundreds of thousands of icons in a couple hundred megabytes.
We are, by the way, just are allowed to transitioning a very high memory, low weight computer device in probably the next 3 months. So there will be something available, and if you guys actually, I'm the program manager, I could probably, if you need it, I could probably maybe arrange to get you a prototype.
That's excellent.
That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, and I was just realizing, I have a very small device that has a text display screen and little, it's black and white icons and everything, but it might be something to look at as, this is the size screen you have to work with. It's probably bigger, but,
Right.
It's an idea.
Yeah, that's good to see what it looks like in different scales. But that's basically, what we have for the demo at this point. So if you have any questions or anything else to say, please do so. Sir, in the back.
How many icons do you have in the dictionary now?
This is that's interesting. For the demo here, we have maybe 20, but we're right in the middle. This is actually somewhat of an old demo we have here. It's almost 3 months old right now. We're kind of in the middle of building in a lot more stuff. Sonny can actually speak to that better because he's actually been building the dictionary piece.
So our current dictionary, we've imported things like glyphs, symbolics, and all the basic standard icons, which is about 5,600 icons. Also, DoD term and acronym dictionaries, which are I don't know how many thousands. We use scripts to import everything. So I think that the next presentation we'll give of the software, the next version, we'll probably have 120,000 entries or more.
Well, Sonny, have you been talking to the coalition chat folks about putting the dictionary into their effort?
Yeah, I've been talking with Julie Howell about that. Specifically, the work that I've been doing to support this effort was just analyzing the chat that's currently there and pulling out 1, 2, 3-word phrases. She's been looking at those lists as well and looking at kind of the more important concepts in between the 1 and 3-word range. We're not pulling out anything more complex than that at this point.
Please.
Another thing to, kind of 2 things. One is, I honestly don't know what the other one is, but just be aware of color. What we're finding with our handheld devices is that we almost end up putting them into monochrome mode because of sunlight. Okay, because once you have any sort of sun glare, you almost lose any visibility at all. But if you have them in a monochrome mode, you're more likely to be able to read it than if you have it in a color mode. So just be careful of that when I know 2525 is really great with all these great colored symbols and all these sorts of things, and there's times it's just not good. But the other thing is it possible when you're establishing chat rooms, is it possible to set up control boundaries within the chat rooms so that if you are back at command and you are chatting with these extreme disadvantaged users, that your access to a lot of these photos and extra dictionaries and all that kind of stuff is disabled?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good. It's something that we're talking about ago. It's actually have a room. So get to a chat room. If it was for a particular area or it's going to the disadvantaged warfighter, that they would share a common dictionary and they would know what the warfighter is going to see on the other end. So they can't mistakenly add something they're not going to get down the warfighter end. They'd be basically using the same subset of the global dictionary in order to communicate. That's a very good idea. That's something we definitely want to implement, especially when we get closer to feeling it's going to be ready for the warfighter. But this brings me to something else I want to ask about, is that the most difficult piece we're running across, besides trying to come up with a better design to do this augmentation, is actually getting enough data to describe all the pieces we need to describe. Sonny's been doing a really good job with the visual language dictionary by exploring glyphs, symbolics, and in the mill standard icons. But we're also thinking about maybe setting up a community with lots of entries and maybe a website. And that we want to get as many people as we can involved in trying to set up this dictionary. So people, when they think they have some really interesting images or something that could be useful, that they would upload it and then actually get peer reviewed by others using the site by allowing them to look at these images to see, well, that's good, but I really think it looks like this more. So this is something that Sonny and I, that we have our plans to try to set up some type of global repository of information. Please, you guys can talk as one.
How about tapping into Wikipedia?
That's a good idea.
What was the tapping into Wikipedia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the piece that we want to be careful with is that we can't. We want to stay away from tapping into anything that's on the internet, because we're always trying to manage, and this will go towards tactical at some point. So anything that's going to that's why we can't use an URL or anything else is going to go outside. But there's several dictionaries that we're looking to using, and Wikipedia would be one to actually get some of the data to store locally. And also, Emily, what was the name? WordNet.
What is that, Princeton project? Yeah. It's completely open source. And you can any of you that have used it,
Right. Tapping in that. You have a question back there, sir? Oh, back up. Him back there.
I don't want to wear that coalition topic hat, but I think that if you focused on centrics or same time, or we'd have more success than the U.S. chat. I mean, to begin with.
Sure.
Because just like she said, folks are literate in the U.S. and they probably this would confuse them, but
yeah, that's a good
talking to our coalition partners, there's a lot of money in centrics and a lot of effort, and so that might be more useful there.
What is centric?
It sets up these coalition networks for like the Japanese or the
I was just thinking about these parentheses.
Australians and so on.
The more explicit meanings for the icons and all this. And right now it's certainly verbose, and it's probably just in its initial stages. But if indeed you do want to have something that is more specific, like that, I think that's a good idea. If you don't want it to pop up off the image or anything, you just want to be really simple so you can read it really quick. But I was thinking that really what you could do is get rid of the original word. Right. You don't need to have the 3 different meanings. You can have the more specific in the symbol, and then that's probably good. Because you don't want to be too verbose. You want it to flow easily when you read it.
Yeah, we're dealing with, we also have the mentality that we didn't want to take away from anything the user originally said. And so there was that piece, because we didn't, but at the same time.
It's just too much, because I'm just sitting here reading it.
Yeah.
And I'm out there in a pathless street. It's just, okay, now where's the end so I can get on with the sentence?
Right.
I understand what this is already. Now I have to scan. And just, it just doesn't work, I don't think, in a bad situation.
I might address that just to note that we feel that presentation is almost as important as the information that you present. So this is like a very kind of first cut, and what we intend on doing with this interface is making it modular so we can make the presentation different and test different types of presentation. Maybe the icon shouldn't even be inside the text. Maybe they should be beside it someplace, indicating like where in general in the history of your text it is. Or maybe in some certain cases the icon should be in the text, or maybe they should be user specifiable.
Or what if the user, what if the user could specify how they want this thing to be laid out, with how they can read where, and that could be a really easy thing to do. I want it 3 ways. I just want the icon, I want it more specific with the icon, or I want the whole thing, or
we want
the checkbox.
We want to do several versions, and so what we're planning on doing is taking this, setting it to the side. I do another cut of the interface, maybe taking the icons, moving over to the left side, so that when you're scanning through, you can just look for the icons that you're interested in, and then you can read that sentence. There's just a lot of ways we're going to kind of play with this to see what's going to be most efficient.
Sure.
Please.
Go ahead.
Have you looked into doing timestamping and user ID or role or whatever they're calling themselves when they log into the chat room, and putting that in there as well?
Yes, it's funny because my background is in IRC and technical comms, because I actually created a small program called VisChat, and so I've been playing with, MIRC, IRC, MS Chat, and very familiar with how the Navy uses their nicknames and how important, timestamp is. And so that's definitely, it's probably going to be something that we're going to add in by the time it's going to go tactical. Because myself and some other people on the team are, we actually deal with the real warfighter stuff already, so we kind of know that stuff is going to be very critical to, for especially messages. Because without a timestamp, it's only so useful, to a warfighter.
You got to know who sent it, and you got to know when it was sent.
Right.
I might have missed this earlier. What's the protocol?
What is the protocol?
Yeah, is it IRC or is it XMPP?
There's no protocol at this point.
Oh.
We're actually experimenting. That's what I'm working on right now. Is actually, this is no network, which is interesting. This is a chat tool without a network, which is because I'm just at this point right now. But we're experimenting with maybe XMPP, maybe IRC, maybe something called Mako down the road. I don't know. But something like that. Right.
Regarding timestamps, we are doing some analysis of text chat data to look at things like what the expectation of like responses within chat environment, within tactical chat environment. So when I type an email, I have an expectation that they'll get back to me at some point in the future, maybe half an hour, maybe a day. but I don't expect an immediate response. Using a chat tool, there's an expectation by the communicator that they're going to get a response fairly quickly. But what is that? What is that expectation? Can we notify the user, inform them somehow, of bandwidth problem or network problem that would mean that they're not going to receive a response in the near term because the person there with the chat room they're talking with has some issues, or some people that are on it have issues, and how do we provide that information? Additionally, with regard to timestamps, we're looking at what are the best representations of time. Is a simple numerical timestamp in Zulu time the right way to express time, or are we discarding information when we do that? Do we lose information about the context in which that user is communicating? Sure, it's Zulu time, but which Zulu time? Where is he at in the world? Is he sending a message at 2 a.m. or is he sending a message at 2 p.m.? Is that pertinent?
What I was about to bring up actually was a text editor that I wrote. I have a small application that can actually, it's a text editor, and the interesting part is that it identifies certain equations and units and allows you within the application to evaluate that equation or convert those units. And as I'm listening to this conversation, I can also do timestamps, for example, convert a timestamp to any other format or any other
very good.
Any other time code or whatever. For military applications, I think locations might also be useful, converting, say, GPS coordinates to actual directions 3 miles north.
We're exploring that to actually try to look at structures, if I get back to you. We're looking at structures so we can maybe see coordinates, anything else that maybe the warfighter uses in compressed form, because they have a lot of messages that look very cryptic, but they actually mean something very specific, like location, the way they do time. Try to recognize that in the middle of the chat and put into like an object they can actually store what it really means, and even grab things such as metrics. So you're talking about 3 miles, and so it'll know that, oh, okay, I know it's 3 miles, but I can right click on it and now I can put it into kilometers, right? Just automatically. Allow the computer to do all the work for the user. Please.
The clock is a 24-hour clock, so there's no problem with morning or afternoon in the military. But the most important part of the timestamp is accountability, responsibility. So if there's information on there that has to be acted on that wasn't acted on, somebody's going to pay the price, and that's why you need the stamp.
Right.
I think, but Caleb, the point that you brought up about lat long coordinates, that's very important. I mean, we're identifying those in the text, and we will be able to hone in on those and actually be able to be more relevant information. And I think, Christy, you were talking about putting in your GPS coordinates, and boom, you would bring up something and say, I'm here.
Yeah, we're trying to find a way to possibly take the sync off of the GPS, and if you click a button that says GPS or something like that, you could auto-insert your GPS coordinate. Now, I mean, Marine Corps, we don't use lat long. We use your NGRS grid, and that's for targeting and all those sorts of reasons. It's very specific. But we can pull, it would be nice to be able to pull that and say, I have reached destination, and click and put in your grid, so you don't have to exit the application, go into a different application to find it, and then bring it back again. Right. So having abilities to tie in external links to other functions on the computing device would be nice.
That's very nice. Oh, that's excellent.
Is there a big brother watching?
This is a prototype, so we're not down that road yet. But yes, basically anything in the military that is written out, it's pretty much so mandated it's going to be recorded at some point. For IRC chat, that's usually recorded back at some centralized server. But depending on how the network is going to be done here, whether it's going to be done via a peer-to-peer setup or some other way, there generally will be some way of recording all the information going across. That way, the lawyers will have something to play with.
I'm most thinking about the little brothers. I mean, some of these icons can be expert icons that can do things. Like what she just mentioned, so that, hey, you should look at this information. So in other words, when this person checking, the additional information can be brought in automatically.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like
Yes.
little browser. You don't have to be very sophisticated. I use those icons can calculate just text.
Right. So they'll act as a small agent that might be able to do some amount of work for you.
Right.
That's very good. Very interesting.
On the comm side of things, some of the things that both the Marine Corps and the Army are looking at is setting up virtual node networks that are not connected back to something like a CyberNet, where you have a network that is a local network, and each person on the net functions as a node to relay information to others who are within the net, and having the capability to set up a chat system and be able to run it on that kind of a network, which I know is very difficult because you don't have a master server or something like that, but having that capability within a chat environment would probably be a good look forward in time.
Yes.
There are virtual networks that are being set up through Iridium. There's virtual networks that are being set up on the ground through RF and UHF, those sorts of things as well.
That's very interesting because in previous work I've done, it's been very difficult for me to get pieces past DoD Navy because they frown upon anytime you talk about peer-to-peer. They go, ooh, peer-to-peer, because it's difficult for them to have control. But to the warfighter, when they're out and about and all they have is a Humvee, and maybe they can connect through that. But other than that, they're basically running these radios that are essentially peer-to-peer. And we want to make sure that our software will work over that just as well as it would maybe like in a fleet circumstance where everything needs to be pushed back to a NOC. So yeah, it's good to have both methods, a peer-to-peer and maybe a centralized server, because they're both very useful. Servers are good because you can have a large community hooked together, right? Because peer-to-peer has difficulties in finding all the peers it needs to do without sending out a lot of traffic. But with a small group of peers, peer-to-peer is excellent with just a tight group of users that are already known to each other. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's the stuff I like to work with.
So these things that are going on right now in the field. You have people who you can connect your laptop computer to one of various different kinds of VHF radios and be able to send communication, send messages to other users on the network. So it's happening now. We have a limited window of opportunity to craft the way it looks for the future. Because someone else is going to, Northrop Grumman's going to create the killer app, and that will take over, and that may not be the app that's really needed.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that world. I've actually done some work with multicast and those kind of environments where you can send out information very quickly to everybody on a net, and that works very well for tactical communications, because not only can you send information quickly, on the flip side, you can find out who's out there automatically. And so I've been playing in that world for a while. It's really neat. I would like to be part of a team that's going to design something like that, so that'd be really cool. Anything else?
Well, I think that we sort of just kind of went ahead and talked a little bit about text augmentation, but if there are any more general approaches, this is one way that we've tried to approach the problem. But if anyone has ideas on an entirely different way that we might think about text augmentation or just communication augmentation, how best can we communicate? Should we be doing is there some advantage in a low bandwidth environment? Maybe we can constrain ourselves that way, that we can communicate rich information in a way that is intuitive and allows communication to occur so that it's unambiguous when it needs to be, and maybe leverages polysemy and other things when it needs to. I mean, there are other techniques we should be approaching, and ways we should be thinking about the problem.
It has what lab?
Vision
lab. I'm sorry.
The Vision Lab, is it MIT or Stanford? I'm not familiar.
Well, MIT's is called something different than that. It does have a lab.
Media.
And Stanford also has a lot of stuff.
What were you going to say about Vision?
people that study this.
Yeah.
Do we have a discussion board? I know we have the VaIL conference. Is that a good time to sort of go back and think about things and how studies are?
Yeah, that's going to be up.
Yeah, they'll continue to be up indefinitely. So that would be a great place to get online and just talk about different issues. Anybody who signs up can post their own topics and begin new discussions. And we'll keep that online, as long as Google's around. So, in terms of some of the things that we've looked at and are thinking about in terms of augmenting text are like doing more like maybe real-time analysis of the text data as it happens. As Gary indicated, that we might be able to do some kind of real-time definition formation, looking at using some heuristics to guide the user or to learn from what the user does in the augmentation process. So in the context of this tool, they would be choosing some kind of visual or an acronym that would be more explicit in the communication, and then maybe the next time that they type that acronym, they don't have to choose it; it just happens because they've done it once, and we'll learn from that, or they've done it twice and we learn from that. So using some very simple like ranking mechanisms and heuristics to make the chat tool smarter by just the user using it in any capacity. Meaning if they never augment anything, maybe we just stop suggesting it, or we stop stepping on their fingers if they're doing it.
I read a paper, I was looking into iterative learning algorithms for email, actually, for going in and learning how people sort their inboxes. I mean, this was a paper from about 10 years ago, and I remember that they first trained, they first had a supervised set, like our visual language dictionary, that, we've trained the application to recognize this certain dictionary, but that you can boost this as well and have an algorithm that will notice things that show up commonly, and you could incorporate from there, kind of like what you're talking about. I just don't know, I've never worked with that myself, so anyone who has any insight on that kind of, I don't know, Craig, if you've ever done something like that.
I think the problem with international language processing tools in this kind of military situation is that common is not commonly correct. Right? I mean, just because it was the most commonly used, so let's say we use a standard disambiguation tool, and we just pick we pick the most common. I mean, the standard way to do this on Google would be pick the most common meaning, given some past experience. But the danger in getting that wrong, the cost in getting it wrong in Google is trivial. The cost in getting it wrong for the warfighter is like that. And when it's supposed to be the least common one, and you give them the most common one, people die. So I'm always a little worried about doing things automatically. I mean, and, my background is to do things as automatically as possible. But in the warfighting situation, we really want to keep the warfighter in the loop as much as possible. So that's my only cautionary tale.
I completely agree with you, and I think the way we've tried to approach the problem is we don't do anything automatically. If we do anything automatically, it's only to build like a richer knowledge-based data analysis they can then pick and choose from.
Well, I think there are some things you can do even more automatically. You might pop up the most common, or you might pop up the set of disambiguation. I mean, you can ring a bell. I think a good use of these kind of tools are to ring a bell when the text typed may be very ambiguous. Right? If the ambiguity is, and that can be operationalized by the past corpus, obviously. Right? Someone typing in, it can go ding when there's some evidence that someone from a coalition partner wouldn't get it as clearly.
That's good.
And those kinds of alerts and different kinds of alerts that we went into. I'm personally a little biased against the audio alerts. I think
that was metaphoric.
You're right. I mean, any kind of alert that says, okay, look at this, I've discovered something here, do you think it's relevant? And having the user be able, see, this is the part that I keep getting, I can't make up my mind on, is do we want to give the option to the user to just say, would you like this incorporated into what you're looking for? Is that causing too much interference? there's a balance there of how much interference you're causing a user each time they get on there,
So
where they'll just turn it off altogether.
An interesting preliminary study would be to take warfighters, put them in a gaming situation, and ideally coalition partners, put them in a gaming situation, and you'd want experienced warfighters, and let them see if this would help, let them see if it got in the way. You'd have to craft it in such a way that it would seemingly be benefit to the icons.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know if we've been like very clear about this, but we don't actually intend this tool to be ever deployed. We actually are building into this tool the capability of it collecting metrics as you use it, and we intend this tool to be deployed as in a kind of experimental test bed to do exactly what you're talking about, which is to measure how effective we are at. We use this extra module that allows this type of augmentation. Does it improve communication, or does it cause problems in communication? Additional tempo change. What effect does it have? And we can then test, like individual small, changes in presentation or in type of information that we're allowing them to augment with. And then, we can use like some kinds of scripted scenarios that are, consistent and can test the ability to, communicate ideas and comprehend them on the other end.
So on the testing, let me have a couple thoughts actually. So let me suggest you actually use some serious game, video game. Because if you do it just a bunch of rooms and a bunch of people in text without time pressure, it's just not going to be a fair enough test. They're going to play with the icons, see if they like it.
I think the game idea is very good.
But if things are blowing up, and come on, these warfighters playing these video games, they get into their character, right? And they're not going to want it to die.
Exactly.
Their character to die.
And also a reason for conversation, something to do.
Well, that's true. It actually gives more realistic content. You want to see how well, and then I think you need some receiver feedback in the system as well. And maybe you said this, if so, then I apologize. But it seemed to me you're talking about the sender choosing what they want to send. But the receiver has to be able to say, I don't get this. Can you give me some disambiguation?
Yes.
And particularly in a coalition situation, I think that's going to be remarkably important.
Right.
It's very simple and very small point, but it seems to me that for the receiver, when you're sending these messages that actually the user has somehow disambiguated, like spelling out an acronym, you don't need to give them the acronym and the spelled out version on the receiver end. Just the spelled out version would be fine. People can read the spelled out version just as quickly as they can read the acronym.
Right.
Essentially. So there's no reason to have both. You're just wasting time for the receiver.
Well, except the first time in my training, it does help to train the receiver that means this.
Possibly, yeah. But if it's always going to come through, it doesn't really matter too much, yeah.
What I really meant is that, so let's say that as a French speaker, I receive something in my English, and it gets translated, or it's given to me in English, and my English is shaky. Can I click and say, I don't get this?
Yeah.
And if it's a phrase that's been that has had icons attached to it in the past, then maybe something could pop up for me.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Military folks speak in acronyms. You can't prevent it.
Yes.
And so you may not know all. And so that would be real helpful to me to be able to click on an acronym and find out what the expansion is.
Right. Sonny, how many has the DoD defined? Do you remember that number?
There's a joint publication that defines like about 5,000 acronyms, and that's just, that's a very small number because the number that's actually used is far greater than that. And we're not just talking about acronyms, we're talking about people using like very, they're dragging and dropping from other tools, and that creates some kind of like, text, semantic that's, not any kind of, like language, it's just some kind of, coded sequence of characters. And they use a lot of like just abbreviations, which, there are some things, like, EW, electronic warfare, and there's a lot of others, but these are used in a kind of ad hoc fashion. And it really seems that, they've sort of emerged because people want to be as succinct as possible in the communication and as quick as possible. They don't want to type electronic warfare, and so they just type EW, and then maybe some numbers that associate with that. And by convention, they either agree because they have a concept of operations that says, well, this is how you communicate this, or they've just somehow allowed this convention to emerge out of their communication.
Please. I would recommend that, just thinking about this myself, that it seems that these acronyms and the translation of these acronyms, knowing full well that acronyms can mean different things, is probably almost more interesting than the icons to describe it. I could always type in chemical oil, whatever, there's like your tank, and there's like 20 different tanks.
Right.
But every time I type in tank, it's going to be a different kind of tank, and I'm going to have to spend time thinking about what kind of tank it is anyway. Whereas if I'm talking in acronym speak, chances are, whatever I do, whatever acronym that's the same as, another 10 of them, I'm going to use the same meaning for the same one every time. Chances are, because that's my scope of reference. That's where I live in the battlefield with regards to those acronyms.
We're also hoping.
And so along with that, perhaps the first time when you start typing in, yeah, it gives you an option, hey, which one do you want of the drop-down list or whatever, right? It pops up, it tells you. And I'm thinking about more of a contextual type pop-up. Then, you can have it learn it. So it's like the first time, say, hey, you want this to be your default meaning for this certain time? Yes. Next time, I never have to do it again. Yep. So as I'm typing, I don't have to worry about what EW is ever again. I can maybe reset it, but I mean, the point is that, yeah, it's a one-time cost for the warfighter. It's very quick and tactically efficient later on. And so because, okay, I do that once when I'm in the training base or, on the plane and flying to Afghanistan or whatever, right? But then once I'm out there, it's good.
Very good. Thanks.
I think you can ask this question. I was going to wonder if there's any statistics on usage of acronym on a per user basis. If they switch off, we're so worried about different meanings of different acronyms.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how many people are actually confused by acronyms that have numerous meanings. Because it may be just in context, it's not an issue.
Right. But somebody reviewing it later would go, what are they saying?
I think that.
And in that case, you want that.
It could certainly be that you could just use the acronyms and only give the receiver the option of, if he doesn't understand something, click a button to question the user. So the user doesn't, so it goes back to questions that the original person that typed the acronym, rather than doing this every time that you have to, so somebody has to take the extra time to do this.
Right.
Well, I think that the comment about allowing the user to choose that, okay, this is a definition I always want to use, and therefore kind of doing it automatically because they say so, is apt. And I should note that we're sort of doing, a dictionary-based compression by doing this, because instead of sending the word, if it was a long word, we're just sending like a 32-bit integer. And so if we're talking about UTF-16, you save a lot of bandwidth that way, basically doing some compression before you use compression techniques. So we expect that we'll get between maybe even an order of magnitude better compression, depending upon the size of the concepts that we're doing this with. So say if at some point we decided that what we really want to do is to, if someone's communicating the same type of idea in some type of general form, that they've got to communicate, targeting information or a pathway through some hills, then we have some, clustering algorithms that are running in real time and doing some analysis to see how close this is to other type of common forms that people use to communicate. And then we say, hey, we have an idea as they're typing, why don't you use this? And the user can be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want to communicate. And then what we're doing is we're sending a very small number of bits, communicating the information they want to communicate in some type of like standard, paragraph or standard format. Thence, we can achieve, a large amount of compression. Now we're doing some type of semantic compression where we're taking a whole paragraph of information and we're communicating that, just a few 32-bit integers that reference which form we're talking about and some of the pieces of information that might be present in there.
And I think that's from a technological perspective, that's a great idea. From a language use perspective, I'm a little wary. I mean, if I presented with a dictionary of concepts to send, how much does that actually change what I send? Right? Do I then try to morph my message into what you presented me. So I think that warrants a pretty serious study to find out whether what gets sent, and I'm not even sure how you would study that, but what gets sent is what was really intended as opposed to.
Well, I think there are cases where it would be just obviously beneficial, where
particularly in a military situation, right? You can
dragging and dropping into the chat tool, form data, right? In which case we should just say like, oh, that's a form, we recognize it, and therefore.
I see.
Right? In that case, it's clearly beneficial. Otherwise, I agree completely about tests.
If I could interject, Sunny, what I'm interested in hearing from anyone in here, I was really impressed with the amount of computational linguistic power that was in the room yesterday, and I was hoping to kind of get some input from some of you who have done any kind of computer-mediated communication analysis, automated analysis. So any kind of text clustering on wikis, blogs, chat, email, any kind of information search and retrieval. Would any of you be able to add anything? I mean, even if it's static information, if it's not, electronic text necessarily. I know my background and my interest in text categorization and clustering, but I know that there's probably some other alternate ways of approaching that as well. Does anyone have anything to add as far as that? And I'm looking pointedly at Neil. I don't know if you've done any kind of work in that at all in your linguistic background, or
not really.
I mean, I don't want to pick you out, but I still wanted to kind of just bring it up and see.
I guess one thought that comes to my mind, I wasn't here for the beginning of the discussion, so I don't know if this will be right. Not work that I do, but work that's done in our department and at University of Michigan. Really looking at what are some of the distributional variabilities of natural language usage by searching corpora. And one recent study was noticing that we're particularly interested in how you predict upcoming words, because we think that's part of how people actually represent their language, is not in terms of abstract rules, but in terms of frequent collocations of words that are used over and over again. And a study by Nick Ellis found that for native speakers, mutual information is a better metric of predicting behavior. Okay, which mutual information takes into account not only the word that you're currently speaking, but prior and subsequent words. So in a sense, native speakers have such a rich knowledge of their language that they don't process in a strictly linear fashion. Right? They're much more kind of hierarchical in the way that Neil was showing us yesterday, in the way that they're processing their language. Whereas for second language speakers, of whom I'm sure there are many participating in these chat rooms, probability was a better metric.
Oh, that is so, okay,
Isn't that interesting?
That's really good.
So it really suggests
that's interesting for your coalition work too, in the sense that you have non-native speakers. We mostly are looking at native speakers right now. Okay. Mutual information is a score that we've been working with. So
transitional probability is just the probability of the next word given the word you're currently speaking.
It's just essentially a bigram.
Right, bigram frequency.
Okay.
It seems to work better for non-native speakers.
What did you say?
I think that transitional probability is part of some of the algorithms.
Okay.
There, right?
Okay. Erin's been doing some of the actual script writing for the analysis of the chat that we have. One thing that we're looking to get a hold of course, is more of a coalition chat area where we're having non-native speakers. We can do that in an unclassified way. We can go on the web and grab that as well, but just in a purely military sense, that's what we're looking at. So thank you, I appreciate that. And Nick Ellis?
Nick Ellis, at the University of Michigan.
I have a question for Neil. Do you think that we can use, or somehow, in the future, use a richer visual semantic to communicate ideas? I mean, we're talking about like some very simple tools for just approaching the problem from like, we've got stuff that's communicated today, and we want to like improve it. But how might we start from the other end? Start from the visual end.
Well, I would say that you want to create a domain in which people can be creative and be creating their own system. So instead of starting off with a set of symbols, like very specific things, like bliss symbols and icons, and give them to people and say, learn this set, and treat it the way that we treat kind of dictionaries and things like that. Treat it instead like creating an environment. Really, they just have to draw. And they'll be creating their own. I mean, you can give them a set of things to work with at first, but I'm sure that just through usage, they'd start creating their own system. And once new people would come in, they just learn the system through experience and exposure, the same way that people normally learn languages. They might have to work to get there, but I think that would be providing kind of a domain or some sort of way in which people can use the apparatus they already have and the intuitions they already have, instead of kind of siphoning them through something that is constructed, would be the best way to go. And I mean, you know, I talk about this perspective of there being different visual languages, and what you might have is just the emergence of, like, you know, military visual language, in this sense that people would just start creating a new system that works off of just their own intuitions about the great form, without kind of people suspecting, well, how should we manipulate some visual thing in order to get what we want. Just start off with a kind of common baseline and let them create it, because they're going to do that anyways. Like, that's what people do online. That's what we were talking about, acronyms and things like that, right? Like lead speak, it just kind of happened. And the same thing will just kind of happen in a graphic domain. I think you just have to provide them the avenue to do it, which is why I would say you want to do something like touch screens that can be drawn on, that aren't just text, linear based. You can have some just sort of, I mean, I do it with my pen pad all the time on my computer, or my other computer at home. I use a touch screen. I draw directly onto the my computer, and it works fantastic. And if you just give them like a blank, you know, what's that?
A Wacom?
Yeah, you can use a Wacom, or, I mean, my computer at home is a Wacom screen, so, you know, I have a pen that I move on my screen. But if you just give like a blank, you know, screen that acts like a canvas of some sort that you can erase and you can draw onto, that what I see on my screen comes up on somebody else's screen, and what they draw on that screen comes up on mine, that provides a free-form way, and then they can write on that, they can draw on it, they can use all sorts of multimodal
that requires, I guess, based on your comments yesterday, that, I mean, it's like a tactical sand drawing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That they have that they're using voice at the same time that they're doing the drawing.
Right, or they can be writing at the same time they're doing the drawing.
Well, the problem with sending writing as a bitmap or picture is the bandwidth. So
right.
Our limitations here are manifold. One is I can't draw or squat, so I don't think that would help.
I was going to say that too.
But I can't draw or squat. You've never seen me draw.
But you can have very simple
It's just
things.
obvious. I was going to ask, because we're talking about lines and circles, I can probably do that.
You can do things like
I
that.
can't
So,
do a circle.
for instance, the Australian sandwich.
Actually, Neil, can I just
yeah, please go ahead.
So there are a couple of really important limitations. One, this information is sent over satellite, which is really, really thin pipes. I mean, it's really hard to send pictures.
There's nothing to say you can't use a separate creative environment to create the symbols.
That's right.
And then be sent over.
That's right. So that was my point. The other thing is that your description seems to have it be happening real time, and real time here is way too fast to do that. However, the way to maybe to do this is to get people in the gaming situation to organically develop their symbols, and then be able to send it over the pipe. But we can't send the dynamically drawn. One, they're not going to have time to dynamically do the sand drawing because there are bombs exploding around them. And then two,
but they can do whiteboarding can actually be done with scalable graphics.
No,
they can use like SVG. You can actually send simple like whiteboarding. You know, where you can just send symbols or just lines, some very simple graphics. It can even work over tactical. So it is possible to get a really rich medium to draw on, but you would be able to get something.
I'm not imagining something that's like highly realistic drawings. I'm imagining something that's like, you know.
The problem is the ambiguity, right? So we need to converge on the pictures, the meaning of the pictures. We've already converged on the meaning of words, so it's
right.
That's why I think doing it real time in an actual battle situation doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
I mean, as you discard, I think both approaches are worthwhile. In the sense of this type of like sand drawing approach, what you're doing is you're in essence augmenting the other communication methods that they have. So say they have like video, they've got high bandwidth, and maybe this type of like drawing, mechanism would assist in producing a better means of gesture, the same way that we might be communicating over a table and we might both want to be drawing and sketching.
No, I buy that. My other comment was on my inventing an icon set, sending it, and then we should have dynamically inventing it. We don't have the time to dynamically invent an icon set during battle.
Right. Certainly. And we wouldn't be inventing an icon set. We'd be simply drawing free form. And I think one of the problems with set is indexing, getting access to individual icons, knowing what's in there. And that's some of the problems that we're trying to solve.
So you wouldn't need like a dictionary of icons because you're creating it, you're drawing it as you create it. That doesn't mean you're creating new icons
so
in warfare.
I think there's some crosstalk in the following way.
Right.
In a chat situation where you have remarkably limited bandwidth, you don't have video, you need to have, as you were talking about earlier, you need to have indices into icon to an array of icons to save the bandwidth. So I don't think this would work in that case. In a higher bandwidth situation, adding graphical gestures to the information, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Although I could see making very simple icons on the fly would definitely be possible.
Things that I was perceiving, so for instance, like the Australian system, I was saying last night a little bit, like their depiction of a person is just, it looks like a U, because that's the imprint a person makes in sand. So, I mean, sort of thing, it's not like I'm drawing a full-on stick figure and things like that all the time. You have a U, and if you say, you know, this person moved somewhere else, you just draw a line or something like that, and that shows a path, and then a person lying down is like an oval, right? Because that's the imprint a person makes when they lie down. And so you retain those sort of very simple features. And then you have, you know, other things. I mean, as bandwidth would hypothetically increase over time.
No, not satellites.
Not satellites.
No, satellites aren't
okay. But you don't need something that complex. Like
right. No, I agree with that, but I think that's pre-existing. Right? What you just said is pre-existing, and then the coalition partner who joins in must have been trained in that.
Right, but
I'm having a hard time imagining the organic growth of that in a battle. That's the part that I think is very unrealistic.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say you'd hope that it. I would hope that you would develop at least some degree of it before going into battle.
So let me take back battle and just say any operational situation, even at peace, because if you're doing an operational situation, you act as if you're in battle. So you mean
right.
Let me interject at this point, and I think this is just an important thing to note. Of course, we had selfish reasons of organizing this for military-specific communication. However, we have everyone from both military and non-military background here working on problems in different arenas. Low bandwidth, we're just trying to kind of let you guys know some of the problems we're facing. These are the problems that the public sector has, and the private sector maybe is not constrained by. However, there are, you know, your ideas about definitely about, you know, creating a representation for a human, drawing path, having those things. That's one way of handling it, and we're interested in those ideas. We may not be able to implement them in the same way, but again, like having someone create icons in an experimental testbed situation might be a way to go. And I think that's what we're really trying to gain from here is, you know, we know what the military can do, and we know what the military can't do, and we're working within those constraints. However, we really wanted to have a more broad sense when we came here to know what's possible and move ourselves forward.
And then I want to say that I think in the testbed situation, I think Neil's idea is a great idea.
Right.
And then maybe you develop a set of organic icons that don't feel so forced as road signs, that actually feel that speak to and for the community better. That's a great idea.
I think that's where that open source clip art somebody linked to in the Google discussion would be useful. Because people are just already coming up with their own icons, and they can use them if you want to.
So to give you a little background, there's a gentleman who joined the discussion group and gave us a link to this open source clip art library, which is a library of scalable vector graphic clip art that's public domain, can be used by anybody, and you know is a fairly interesting and rich resource. And I think that a little later we'll talk in more detail about like what kind of visions we might all have on creating a repository for visual language. And how we might approach that problem. And I think that clip art library is like sort of meets some of the requirements in that it stores, you know, graphics of some sort, but doesn't meet other that I think we see as important. Like being a place where researchers could come and create online experiments on, you know, meaning to test whether or not people perceive a given icon as meaning something or meaning something else. or testing whether or not, well, all these things I think we can talk about in a lot of detail.
And also I want to comment is that our demo showed very simple chat room dynamic, but we would also like to experiment with others. And Neil, what you're saying is actually kind of related to work that they do in whiteboarding to some extent. And I think it'd be really interesting if you could somehow, put the two worlds together, chatting, creating your own icons, and actually keeping a scene that's ongoing using like scalable like vector graphics, so we keep the bandwidth down, but still you can start drawing out pictures and let everyone know. I think that would be a really interesting way of conveying information. It would be very free and it might be very powerful. So I'd really like to. It's good input. Thank you.
I think SVG may be a little too chatty for like low bandwidth needs because there's an awful lot of cruft in SVG that has to do with XML format.
Yeah, we'll probably have our own version that would scale down.
There are plenty of other means of transmitting vector graphics, and it's probably a good idea to keep it within even more constrained subset. Not even ASCII, but like even more constrained, because an awful lot of the militaries of the world still run on Morse. So we're talking speeds of less than 100 baud, and people just sort of clicking mics for communication purposes.
Yeah, but for the warfighters, we've got a lot of feedback, and whiteboarding is very useful to them, and they use it a lot just to describe, something like maybe even something technical they're looking at. They'll draw out something, they'll draw out a map and say here, there. It's used all the time, and actually being able to take that and compress it into a binary format and send it, make it really tiny because there's not that information. There's just color, shape, and there's just so you can get that pretty small, and it'd be interesting to infuse it. Yeah.
Yeah, you may not even have to send it as something like SVG.
Sure.
You have a agreed upon protocol, and you could just send deltas.
Yeah, I've rolled my own in the past and made it pretty small, but it'd be interesting. You have a question?
I just had a couple. I'm way out of listening to all of this, but just a couple comments.
Okay.
One is, I'm not saying that y'all are doing this, but to the extent that we're imposing a system, inventing and imposing a system, from my perspective, that's never going to work. The French Academy is never going to determine how French gets used by actual people, no matter what they say. And inventing, imposing languages doesn't work. People have to, for these systems to work, to have a converge on a shared meaning. In order for people to converge on a shared meaning, they have to use it and use it over time. So for that reason, I really like Neil's comment. I think you got to let them do this on their own because it's going to happen anyway, right? No matter how we impose and say this symbol means this, it's not going to work. And the other thing is that the meanings of icons aren't transparent. I mean, that is a convention too. We have to learn the convention of what this icon means. And especially when we start combining icons, we saw that yesterday with just combining icons with the negative operator, right? That you can't predict what that's going to mean. Combining a picture of a road with a negative operator doesn't mean there is no road here. It means don't enter this road. Combining a cigarette with a negative icon doesn't mean you're not allowed to bring cigarettes in here. It means you're not allowed to smoke in here. Combining, you see in neighborhoods with a negative icon on it, right? That doesn't mean ears are not allowed here, or there are no ears in this neighborhood. That means there are deaf kids here who can't hear. And that's always going to be the case with language. All these things are you're always going to get a emergence, a growth of polysemy, and you're never going to be able to predict what these things mean. Meaning is not compositional in that sense. Meaning is only a very, very underspecified cue to what the actual meaning is.
So Sherman, kind of on that, I was having this kind of far out idea, but there's this website called Gnosic, GNOOSIC.com, I believe, and this gentleman in Germany decided what he did. He's implemented a clustering algorithm. I'm interested in algorithms. I like to try out different things. And what he's done is you can do books, music, and basically you enter in your 3 or 4 favorite bands, 3 or 4 favorite books. And what he does is he has a learning, a clustering algorithm that implements your choices and weights all the different values again and gives you clusters of things like, oh, if you like these bands, you might like these other ones. Now, if we had some kind of repository online for people, for icons, say, we're not defining, we're not imposing a text-based definition, we are giving a neighborhood of context.
But Emily,
and that I think is I find that very interesting. I think that's maybe a way of getting a little closer to what you're talking about, is by, and this is a user-defined thing, so users are coming in and configuring these things.
Amazon does it too,
right? Right, yeah, Amazon does the exact same thing, but I'm interested in the algorithms that can drive this kind of getting to a neighborhood of meaning instead of saying, okay, this is a supervised learning, I'm going to tell you what all these things mean.
But unsupervised learning only works if there are clear dimensions of similarity.
Correct.
And it's not clear to me that icons, A, will have clear dimensions of similarity, other than people saying this is my opinion, which is just group supervised learning. Right. So my only fear about that is that in the time it takes to converge, battles have happened. I completely agree that languages have to evolve organically. Look at chat. You tell the military to speak one way, and they just happen to act like human beings, right? And they speak the way that they. But in the heat of things, they can fall back upon this proscribed language to try to get things clear. So I think starting solely from organic is not the right way. I think seeding it with something official that's allowed to grow.
Right. But the thing that you're missing that's fundamental about battles is your training only gets you so far. The situation is always fluid. We're always experts at the last war, at the last battle. The things that we train for are almost never anticipating the next thing. It's difficult to anticipate surprise.
I buy that in, but I don't. Then maybe I misspoke my point because my point doesn't address that. My point was that if I want to develop icons on the fly, and I want to use icons to help me disambiguate, and so I'm in the middle of a heated situation. I say, oh, forget the words. I mean this. That's going to be completely useless to me.
Well, say for example, you took the approach of if I draw something once, it then becomes part of my personal library of things that I've drawn and assigned meaning to. And the next time I want to produce that meaning, the other people that have already received that know the meaning, know what the symbol is. I've already drawn it once, I don't have to draw it again.
Pause, please, I'm going to be rude. How do you know that they know what that meaning was? How do you know that they received that? Particularly in a coalition situation where it's, I'm using an Australian version of person and someone else is using something different.
Because it was the meaning you agreed upon when you drew it.
Because you established it within your group.
Yeah. It just is, so then I think it's not realistic, and that's okay. I think that we can start with this in training situations, and we can build. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's what that was going to be my next comment to what you're saying. If you're saying military in the field situations, I'm talking about the training. That what can we do beforehand?
Okay, but now let's think.
How can we drive future capabilities?
But now take a NGO military operation after a tsunami. Suddenly you have the Red Crescent, the Red Cross, folks from Thailand, a local hospital, and the military all standing up chat together. My local icons just create the same problem we have with acronyms all over again.
You have to have a predefined set, and the Army, the military, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines are very highly trained, and in a tactical situation, he's right, we'll fall back on these highly trained,
I think there's two things going on here. One
but
is
I
that
do think you can augment that, and in other situations possible.
Well, one, I think that if you have a predefined set, it's never going to work as well as an organic set.
I think an organic set developed on the fly will never work as well as a predefined set.
And two, any organic set will always be bound to a local community. So again, it comes back to this assumed universality of to what degree.
Ultimately, whether your end users create this set, or whether you're letting people create it on the fly in battle, ultimately, at some point, it's going to be a predefined set. Ultimately, the next person coming in has to learn it. So you don't want to, why would you generate it in a battle
Well, here's another
situation
interesting
when you
question.
could generate it, you know?
So Mill Standard 2525B is like several thousand icons. And getting access to these via some kind of like computer search means that you've got to search using text to find it, to find the icon you want to use. Use some means of getting access to it. Maybe that's not the most productive way.
That's not true.
Maybe
You can, there are programs where you can just give, you can give the program dimensions and it will create the icon for you.
Right, right, okay. Bear with me for a second. Maybe the best way of getting access to a library of thousands of icons is not to search or not to use some kind of computer interface to get to it. Maybe the best interface is to draw it. And then that drawing finds the specific icon you want. And
yeah.
Maybe that's the best way to
well, so,
instead of saying what we think is going to happen and what we think isn't going to work, we I believe have the freedom of some amount of experimentation.
yeah, that's what we need exactly.
Yeah, what we need is, you know, an NTC rotation, or some fleet operations where, you know, where we don't have to like bug the kids in Bahrain, but we could do it in the Pacific.
Yeah, exactly.
And just see under battle circumstances, because they will still be counting, there will still be injuries racked up, and see what does or does not emerge.
I think we can even do it in actual gaming situations with training, or training situations.
Yeah. Also, searching for icons, talk to us later. We got some folks at MITRE that are developing searching databases for insurgent graffiti. So I think we got some stuff that we might be able to share.
So
I think we're going to take just a short break and then come right back and have a...
those who want to continue battle will meet in the hallway.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for your comments.
Helping us out, and the feedback was excellent. Thank you very much.
I'm thinking it's not just so you can go right. What does that mean? Because it's the same square, but you're not conveying the same sorts of concepts. You're conveying things that are spatial and narrative. That way. You know what I mean? So I mean, you can modify verbalization. It doesn't mean you can modify it within the system. You don't use the graphical system.
Hi there, this is going to be a really different kind of presentation. I am an artist, and I'm over at the Arts Lab at, intertwined with high performance computing here on campus, and part of the governor's $3 million initiative where we are the pinnacle of interdisciplinary research at the University of New Mexico. And we encourage people from all kinds of departments to come and work with us, where we have a large box, green screen, motion capture, and a 15-foot research and development full dome theater set up like the Lodestar downtown. Also, the University of New Mexico is on the National Lambda Rail, and I am working on a project called the Grid Jam, which is completely the opposite of what you've been talking about. It's got geographically distributed musical performance, which is composed by Alvin Curran, who's a very well-known avant-garde composer. And my partner and I are, David Britton is my collaborator with the virtual color organ. We're doing real-time virtual reality visualization of the music with 3D avatars of the players, and they're spread all over the world. And we're working on, this optical network, which is like a direct telephone line. It was originally developed by DARPA, et cetera, but you guys seem to be working on low bandwidth, so I'm the opposite of you. And I'm here today to talk about the various visualization systems that I've created over the last 30 years in my career of visualizing music. And unfortunately, you're really not going to see very much of it because this projector is not very good. You can see it on my computer screen, but that's kind of hard to see. So I hope you will bear with me. Anyway, I wanted to start here. This is my website, www.jackox.net, and you can go in and really investigate a lot of the music I've been doing on your own and see it on your wonderful monitors. I'm sure you all have great monitors at home, right? Yeah.
I see that it's a little bit, that you're getting cut off a little bit on the right.
Don't worry, it's going to be okay on the slides.
Okay.
That's just, you know, I just wanted you to see that, and you can see all the musical things that, most of what I'm showing you today is actually off the website. So basically what I've done here is I've made up a lecture feeding off of all of my work, just showing visualization systems. And so you can see how artists are really trained notion of metaphor. We spend our entire lives and careers thinking about these sorts of things. And when we come together and we work with scientists and we start to work my work is a very disciplined work. I don't hear music and make drawings or paintings. I actually have studied music theory, done musicological analyses, studied phonetics, done phonetic analyses, and worked out ways to translate that into complicated systems of visualization. It's going to be totally different. So, starting with, this is my, unfortunately, it's not very good color either. B flat major should be orange, and you know, this should be very yellow. So imagine it, yellow, that's orange. I mean, the oranges and yellows are not coming through. But basically, I took a 12-step circle of fifths, I spent 10 years translating all the themes of Anton Bruckner's Eighth Symphony into a series of paintings. I was still working digitally like this, not digitally like in Maya. And working with a harmonic color, system. And so I took a 12-step color wheel and put it on a circle of fifths, which is a circular organization of keys that all people in music, are using. So keys which are closely related to each other are next to each other in the circle of fifths, the same as in a color wheel, and keys which are very, very different are opposite on the circle of fifths as a color wheel. So I just took two systems that were the same, put them together, and made the minor keys 3 steps behind on the inside. So as Anton Bruckner would modulate through keys, I would modulate through colors. And I would make these very transparent glazing systems that I put over the images. So you would see the images through the key. And you can actually tell, any layman can see if you're going to a closely related key or one which is far away. Now, in this system of harmonic movement, you also have harmonic quality. And a pure consonance, which is like hearing one note or 2 notes an octave apart, that's a consonance. That means that they are vibrating, the sounds are vibrating in a mathematical ratio. And then there's a fifth, that's a different kind of ratio, but it's still very consonant. And then you can go into chords which are vibrating in a very different ratio, so you actually hear beats physically when they're vibrating together. So like a diminished 7th chord would be very, very dissonant, meaning that their beats are out of sync. And so in this system with the Bruckner, a pure consonance comes directly off the wheel, but if it's very dissonant, it will have 50% of its complementary color layered over or under it, depending on what the 2 colors are. So you get a gray, but you get a different kind of gray than you get from black and white. You get orange and blue is one kind of gray. Yellow and violet is another kind of gray. Red and green is another kind of gray. So I have 6 levels of different dissonance. So very dissonant, 50%, 50%. Less dissonant, 40%, 60%. Less, 30, 70, etc. 6 levels. So you can actually visually read what's happening in the harmonics, the chromatic harmony of Anton Bruckner. So you really can't see it. But this is one of my scores for the painting. And here you would see black, white, and various grays. And that will tell you how much dissonance. So if it's white, that stands for consonance. Black stands for dissonant. And you can't see these colors either, but these are reds. And so it's going to be a very greenish red in the painting, less green, more red here, etc. And it's really very disturbing. If you can see my computer, you can get the colors. And here is the painting, but once again, I feel like it's a real wash, if you can see that. You go online and you'll be able to see the colors rather clearly. So here's another score which shows the colors that will be on the painting, and that shows the dissonance and consonance. Yes?
Can you just reiterate for me, when you say dissonance, you're saying that the harmonic, they're further apart?
Harmonic quality. Dissonant is like where you have things, you have disparate vibrations.
They're 180 degrees out of phase, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you can hear beats. When you have to tune, I played harpsichord for 6 years, and that's how I learned about dissonance and consonance, because I had to learn how to hear those beats. So, you know, when you're tuning, if you're doing well-tempered tuning, you have to hear 1 beat per second. It goes kind of wah, wah, wah. So I really began to understand what that concept was, and I worked it into a color concept. And we'll see these later. Now, the second color system that I created was when I started working with, I don't know how many of you know who Kurt Schwitters is. That's the American pronunciation. In German, you'd say Kurt Schwitters. We'd say Schwitters. So he was like a very famous German artist from the 20s and 30s. And he was famous for developing collage into a rich language. Picasso and Braque invented it, but Schwitters really developed it. And that's one of the things he was well known for. But he also wrote a lot of poems, sound poems. And he made a sound poem, 21-minute sound poem called the Ur Sonata, meaning primal sonata, or sonata in Urlauten, and it used totally German phonemes. So I was living in Germany, and I went to the University of Cologne and got into the Phonetic Institute and learned how to analyze this whole thing by phonetics, because it's just his voice reciting, and it's all phonemes out of German. So in order to do the glazes, those colors, I decided to do it on the VaIL system. And all of the other phonetic attributes like plosives and fricatives were done in a collaging system. So here we have the system I just explained to you, but transposed into phonetics. This is a chart which has just German, no, actually it may have English on it too. And I split the wheel into 2 halves, warm colors, cool colors. Warm colors did unrounded vowels. Cool colors did rounded vowels. And my logic on that is when you round your vowels, you're extending the whole chamber. It gets longer. And so therefore it should be on the cooler side. And unfortunately you can't see the colors. But this is an unrounded. That's E, and it's actually a kind of a yellowy green. And E is kind of an orangey color. And here we're going red. This is E, A, E, red, orange, and so forth. So it goes down the color, down the list. As the tongue, that stands for the tongue high in the mouth. As the tongue moves down, you move down the list into the darker colors. This is the front of the mouth, and it will be a pure color. Right behind it, right behind the teeth, E, U, that's going to be 10% complementary color, 20% in the middle, 30% moving back from the middle, 40 and 50% complementary color. So I just transposed the system for harmonic movement and quality into a system for vowels, and the vowels actually paint over all of the fricatives and the plosives, so you don't have that sausage of cutting things up. And you can explore it later, but that's just the first movement of the Ur Sonata. It was actually the last handmade work I did, and the whole thing is 800 square feet. Here's where, when I started working with composers in our own time, often they're working with timbre-based music. Timbre means the color of sound. And you know if a musical composition is timbre-based because you cannot reduce it to a piano score. That means all the structure is based on layering of different instruments together, creating a structure through the color of sound. So this is, there was a composer, Darijan Mizell, who created a piece of music called Quanta and Hymn to Matter, which is totally based on timbre. And this is part of the vocal part of the composition. And I just actually colored the vowel sounds over his actual score. I came to the realization I had to think about how do you do the timbre of the human voice. Now, one of the things I've noticed in discussions during this conference is people talking about, well, you can't obviously get absolute timbre for every single voice. It would have less meaning structurally. It's improbable to do it. So you have to come up with ways, with methods to delimit what you are actually encoding in a visualization system. So I decided, first of all, that bass, soprano, things like that, that's a pitch or a range issue. But timbre in the human voice would be these vowel sounds, because as we sing, as we change the vowel that we're saying, then we're changing the entire shape of the vocal track. We're changing the shape of the instrument, and that is the timbre that I am structurally showing you visually. So if you could see that properly, how the different vowel sounds come up with different colors. And I just put a few pages up, but I have a huge amount of work. I worked with that composer going through all of the instruments in the orchestra, and not only an instrument, like this is trumpet, which is supposed to be orange,